Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlipp. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Apologies for yesterday. You probably heard at the end of Packernet After Dark, I had mentioned I got to hurry so I can get the other one done, and I did not. Part of the... part of the issue yesterday, I guess, is a little bit of analysis paralysis and trying to, how do I perfectly solve this equation so that I can deliver the good message to the good people, And I don't have anything fully fleshed out, but I've got a bunch of different shower thoughts just kind of sitting here. And what I want to eventually get to, this isn't going to be the whole time, because I'm sure some of you are not here for the philosophical discussions, although that is what we're going to do for the first part of this. Because we just gotta frickin' unload this right now, and then we'll see where it goes if I decide to dig in a little deeper. But I can't move on until this is off my mind. We got to talk about the Green Bay Packers and the fact that they are the number one team in the NFC. That has to be a discussion, as well as some of the other metrics that might point to the fact that. Let's just say, although I don't know that anyone would agree they're number one outside of their record, I don't know that there's any metric that would say that they're number one. They're also not a bad team. In fact, I've been very surprised by almost every single metric, every single ranking, at least the statistical kind of rankings, not just like Colin Cowherd's moronic, I'm going to throw together a list here. I don't even know where he puts the Packers, but I don't care. It's irrelevant. He has no basis for anything other than I wake up in the morning and I just go, yeah, here's what I think. We got to talk about Colin Cowherd, too. I don't know if we're going to get there today, but that freaking guy. Which, by the way, we'll get there when we get there, but I will say that there are a lot of people that do what I'm doing right now, which is just providing content across the NFL for the Green Bay Packers, etc. Obviously, I mean, there's no shortage, which is why I appreciate that you're here, because time is limited. The amount of time you have to actually listen is limited, and you're here, so that's very nice of you. Thank you. But the fact of the matter is there are so many people putting out, and maybe it doesn't provide the same entertainment value to listen to some people put together some kind of a statistical model. I understand that for some people the debates and the rantings are interesting, probably part of the reason you're here. But I don't think I'll ever understand why somebody like Colin Cowherd is given, I don't want to say a platform. I understand why he's given a platform, because he makes a lot of money, and he makes a lot of money because a lot of people will listen to him. Now, at the same time, they could probably pick somebody else and put him on a major network, and they would listen to that person as well. But whatever. Pretty sure his YouTube does well as well. I don't know. It's just odd to me that people will put in work to give you an actual answer, and Colin Cowherd will have more people listen to his just random musings. But I guess that's how most people think anyways. Anyways, that kind of ties into what we're talking about to begin things here. We somehow came full circle. I'm going to do my best to try to make this a cohesive thought, although there's like 3 or 4 things all converging into one here. One of the things that prompted us to get here where we are today was, this is all kind of shower thoughts type stuff, but I had done the QPI, which is a metric that I kind of just made up, a little bit of help with AI, but there is an inherent flaw in what I told you that is relatively obvious but needs to be mentioned. And why this needs to be mentioned will hopefully start to make sense soon. But I had gone on a little bit of a talk about statistics and why we can know certain things and all that kind of stuff. And what I got really hung up on was its predictability of the future. And I stand by that. The issue comes in where there is an reliance on what are called stable metrics. Stable metrics are things that are stable across time. They're not massive fluctuations. In other words, if somebody has a ton of interceptions, if a guy has 12 interceptions, you could try, because obviously, the main idea here, and fans or whatever that will point to this are not necessarily wrong in saying he obviously had a great year. Look at all the interceptions. Well, of course he did. That's not incorrect to say that. Interceptions carry massive value. And by him doing that as many times as he did, he gave a ton of value to his team, to his defense. The problem is when I try to apply that to the future, to say, let's say next year in 2026, who's going to be the best corner? If you just grab the guy that had 12 interceptions, you're going to be wrong more often than not, because that's not going to, that has proven to be a thing that is not reliable in the future. Now, I thought about this as well, where you could say he was the best corner last year, but that doesn't necessarily mean he is going to be the best corner in the future. But even that, I think, is untrue. And the reason I say that is because I think what is inherent with the stable metrics or the unstable metrics is that they're unstable because they're fluky. They're very luck reliant. If it was a talent-based thing, it would be stable. It's unstable because it's luck-based. So even saying he was the best corner this year because of the interceptions, I'd be less willing to fight you on that, but I still think it's untrue. Because I think you're relying on instability metrics, which means you're relying on luck metrics. It's possible that there are some that are not that way. I don't know. Anyways, moving on. This is going to feel like you're traveling through an ADD brain for a little bit, but I'm really hoping this is all going to come together at some point. So just come along for the ride. The inherent problem with that is that stable metrics in and of themselves are not necessarily good metrics in telling you how good someone is. Stable metrics are nothing more than metrics that are stable, that are reliable. But that's different than a metric that is good at telling you what you want to know. Let me give you a perfect example. If we just said, give me all the best stable metrics, and I'm going to plug that in, and that's going to tell me who the best quarterbacks are. Find me the most stable metrics. You know what the most stable metric is in the NFL? Height. Height is a stable metric. It is an unbelievably stable metric. In fact, I'd be shocked if it moves at all for any player. It is a stable metric. Height, however, is not going to give you a very high correlative value when it comes to the quality of a player or a quarterback. It might have some. In fact, in some cases, it has an inverse relationship, surprisingly, depending on what you're looking at. But stability in and of itself doesn't make it a good metric. It makes it a reliable metric. And so you need to have good data, and it needs to be stable data. Now, the thing that I still, and this is the one thing I've been hammering that I have not figured out, that I spent way too much time on yesterday that may have caused me to not do a podcast yesterday, but the circularity of how you know something is a good metric. Well, how do you know it's good? Well, when you test it, it has a high correlation to the good thing. Well, what's the good thing? Well, pick a different metric. Well, how do I know that's good? Well, you don't, other than pinning it to another metric and pinning it to another metric. I don't know how to get out of that feedback loop. I'll figure it out eventually. Numberman, if you have an answer, I don't know, somebody that's a math person. I have no idea how to get out of that loop right now. But the only thing I can really think of right now, for example, DVOA, why I like DVOA, again, comes back to its predictability. Insofar as it allows me to predict the thing that it says that it's telling me. For example, DVOA tells me that this team their offense is 30% better than an average offense. Their defense is 10% better than an average defense. And so, very simply, the metric that I've put together when I give you my score predictions, I'll give you the formula. It's very straightforward because logically, in my mind, this should pan out. And very often, it's pretty close. In fact, how often it ties very closely to what Vegas says tells me that it's a very good metric. It's very simple. How many points do you typically score in a game? 25. Great. This defense is 10% better than an average defense. Okay, 25 points minus 10%, which is 2.5 points, drops you to what? 22.5. There's my prediction, 22.5, call it 22, 23, whatever you want to call it. Now you end up with two different scores when you run it out in its totality. And you can average that or however you want to handle that. But the point is, if what they're saying is correct, if I can say this is the expected points scored just generally with no adjustments, which is why I also will use home and away. I'll try to get a good feel for, without looking at opponent, which is what DVOA is it's opponent adjusted. So if I look at a non-adjusted value, if I can find a solid non-adjusted value of 25 points, this is what they've been reliably scoring on the road, whatever. And you can try to refine that even more, in warm weather, in rainy weather, in a dome, whatever. This is what I believe the non-adjusted value is. Then I apply the adjustment of how good this defense is. It should give me a value. And if that is consistently reliable, then just arbitrarily coming in saying DVOA is stupid is objectively incorrect. But it needs to be able to demonstrate that it's able to predict what it says that it's telling you. And the thing that I like about DVOA also is, this is another kind of weird, I don't know, maybe should even go down this road because I don't even remember exactly how it all worked in my head. Forget it, we'll skip that. I'll have to go back and hammer that out. But are you with me so far? We need reliable and stable metrics. And this stuff is important because when we do PFF day, which we're going to get to, when we do DVOA, when we look at all these metrics, some people just kind of roll their eyes, especially on social media. There is this smartest guy in the room syndrome, which is hilarious to me. People do this morally, by the way, as well, but let's stick to intellectually. There is this thing that people like to do where they can pretend that they're smart by simply saying that they're smarter than a very intelligent metric. In other words, a very intelligent mind built a very reliable metric, and everybody just arbitrarily decides to crap on that metric. And so you can just simply walk in the room, sign your name on the list as somebody who doesn't rely on that metric, so that when somebody posts it, you get to say, you believe that? And suddenly you are more intelligent than the metric simply by joining the chorus of morons who will say that this metric is bad. You have done nothing. You know nothing. You don't watch film. You don't know anything about statistics or anything of that matter. You don't know how they work, why they work, or any of that. You know nothing. You rely entirely on your emotions and your gut feeling, and then you run on social media, you say something that your feelings dictate to you, and then when somebody provides you with a reliable, mathematically proven metric, you say, you believe that? And suddenly, in your mind, that shows you are the smartest guy in the room by simply walking in and going, that's stupid. Everybody knows. The moral equivalent of that is very obviously just a group of people say, if you want to be a good moral person, you have to have these beliefs, and all you got to do is sign your name, and then you can go off living whatever kind of a not great life you're living, but hey, I signed on the dotted line that I believe all those things, so I'm a good person. It's the same thing people do intellectually. I don't have to do any work to learn anything, to know anything. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to pursue knowledge in any way whatsoever. I just have to repeat whatever other people say and vomit out whatever just comes off the top of my head, and then I get to pretend that I'm super intelligent, which is crazy that people can convince themselves of that having no knowledge of anything. That's basically what social media is. People who know nothing about a topic acting and having intellectual debates, which is crazy that somebody would engage in a debate that they don't know anything about and feel like they're right and that they know what they're talking about. Have you looked at anything about? No, I just know, dude. I'm just super smart, man. Okie dokie. Okay, so tell you what, let's take a break here. When we come back, we're going to kind of put a bow on this. There's just two things that I want to do from here. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, so I want to be specific about, I don't know which one to do first. Let's start with fan how you want to fan. This was sort of the second shower thought that kind of converged into the first one. I had somebody on social media one time. I was kind of arguing with, I don't even remember the context of it, but I don't know, arguing with somebody about something. And somebody's comment to me was simply something to the effect of, I can't believe you're going to sit here and tell people how they should fan. And I'm embarrassed to say that did cause me some pause, because even though it didn't really even apply, now I remember what it was. That was when I said the 2-button thing with Aaron Rodgers. If you could choose today, Rodgers plays well, Rodgers plays poorly. No, you don't get a third button, none of that. You have to push one of these buttons. Which one do you push? That will kind of dictate where you're at. And somebody made that comment. Now, that's the wrong time for that comment, because I'm not telling anybody what button to push. I'm just telling you objectively that will put you in a category of a certain type of fan. I didn't even tell you what you are allowed to do or not do. That is up to you. That is a fan how you want to fan thing. If you want to root for Rodgers over the Packers, fan how you want to fan. But just be very honest about what you're doing. Now, I know everybody wants to find that third button or whatever. Everybody wants to find that, well, I'd like him to play well, but we win. That's fine. But you're trying to find nuance. I'm trying to get down to the core issue. It's one or the other. Which one are you picking? And I'm not even taking it to the point of, well, how about, do you want Rodgers to win or the Packers to win? No. Let's keep it simpler than that. Rodgers plays well or Rodgers plays poorly. We don't know who wins. You could say Rodgers plays poorly and he still beats the Packers, and it's the worst of both worlds. You could say Rodgers plays well and the Packers win and you get your wildest dreams come true. But you don't know. And so you have to pick your priority. Again, that's all I'm saying. Now, it's just to put you in a category. But again, fan how you want to fan. With that said, though, it did cause me to kind of pause for a minute, because there is, at its core, I have always been kind of a fan how you want to fan guy. But at the same time, I spend, 45 minutes a day here telling people what they should think. And so I kind of had to parse that out for a minute in my mind. And so what I've kind of come to is the reality that fan how you want to fan is not all things are exactly even, right? There are maybe limits to it, or at least degrees to it. So, for example, if you say "Go Pack Go" back to somebody who says it to you, that's a fan how you want to fan thing. I have an opinion on it, but I obviously would not try to dissuade anybody from doing, oh, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that, bro. I'm not going to do that. I'm not saying it, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. If you wear a Packers jersey, if you wear your lucky underwear, whether you are a sitter at the stadium or a stander at the stadium, and yes, people who like to sit, standing is a fan how you want to fan. Maybe leave those people alone. If you don't like it, stand your lazy butt up. God forbid we have a raucous crowd. Shh, sit down. It's not a library, bro. By the way, that whole thing cracks me up. The idea that the people standing, I had pushback on that the other day, and it didn't surprise me who the pushback came from when you looked at it. It was, let's just say my elder, which is kind of what you picture when you picture the, whether you call them the gold package or green package, gold jacket, green jacket, whatever. People that go to a lot of games, and they're not about all that standing and raucous stuff. We just go and have a good time. We just sit, grab a beer, and just relax. You have fans and the coach on the sideline screaming, jumping up and down, waving their arms. Get up, get loud, get crazy. And then when somebody stands up, you have people in the back going, shh, sit down, I can't see. Shh, quiet. I can't hear what they're saying in the huddle. Shh. Bro, get out. Go home and watch it on your television. What is wrong with you, dude? That's why they have seats in the stands. Yeah, I know. They have seats at concerts, too, dude. You ever been to a concert? If you sit down, you're going to miss the show. Unless it's a Yes concert. It was the only concert I've ever been to where everybody sat. And I'll be honest, I enjoyed that. I don't like standing the whole time for concerts. It hurts your legs. But you don't have to stand the whole time. It doesn't matter. We'll move off that. Fan how you want to fan. But there's also another category. And that is things that are objectively true or false. Now, it's technically fan how you want to fan insofar as if you want to choose to be ignorant, if you want to choose to be wrong, Or even, you know what, there's kind of a halfway one. How about the negative fans? Technically, that's still fan how you want to fan. It's a little nuanced, though. If we're talking glass half empty, glass half full, if I said, look, the Packers are number one, the Packers are good in these areas, here is a list of their good players, here's where they're struggling, here's a list of their bad players, here's a list of the problems that they're having. If we both acknowledge everything, we agree on everything, but I choose to focus more on the good and you choose to dwell on the negative, I guess that just comes down to fan how you want to fan. You could maybe argue in terms of your mental well-being that that's not great. It's not good for the fan base. It becomes toxic. It's probably not good for your family or your dog who you kick. But again, if we agree on the details and you just say, I don't care, I want to dwell more on the negative and I want to sit here and say fire LaFleur 24/7 and that's how I want to enjoy my day, all right, that's up to you, I guess. However, when it comes to those objective details, when we talk about the facts, for example, if, let's just pick an easy one, if somebody said we're not number one in the NFC, and we're not number one in the division. Like, not just in terms of talent. I'm talking about we're actually not by record. If the playoffs were today, we would not get a bye. It's really not a fan how you want to fan thing. That's not an area where I have any obligation to say, well, I mean, if that's your child, it's your life. You live how you want to live. There are things that are objectively true and objectively false. I don't have to fight you to death on it. If you're going to be that stupid, we can agree to disagree, I guess. But you are wrong. And again, if you want to fan how you want to fan by being an ignorant idiot and believing things that are objectively proven true or false, and you want to believe the opposite because you just feel like it, because your feelings are dictated, I want to be angry about something, even if it's objectively untrue and can be proven, you have the right as a human being to choose to be ignorant. We know that. We see that every day. And I think that that's good. We shouldn't jail people or whatever for being incorrect. Maybe some people, but most people we shouldn't. It's a joke. I'm just joking. But I can't really put that in a fan how you want to fan thing. I can't just brush that off as, well, just leave him alone if that's how he wants to fan. No, you're incorrect. And so that kind of brings us back full circle to the final point of what we talked about before, where metrics are objective and measurable in terms of how good or bad they are. We know these things, and it is not a fan how you want to fan thing. And so I'm going to, as a final point, talk about a hot topic, which I'm sliding. Part of the reason I bring it up is because I'm sliding more and more into the fan how you want to fan side of this when I shouldn't be. And that is when we do PFF Day. I know some of you are not into PFF. I know some of you really don't appreciate PFF, and that's fine. PFF grades, I'm not talking about their stats, I'm talking about their grades, are objectively good metrics. I don't care if former players don't like it. Former players are idiots. Have you heard them on television? They don't know anything. They're good at football, and that's it. The fact that I'm supposed to listen to them on other stuff is useless. It's not going to make me better at anything. I've tried listening to them, and the vast majority of the time I hate what every single one of them has to say. Their opinions are garbage. They don't do any research. They don't know what they're talking about. They're awful. Now, some of them are pretty. I think the QB school guy is quite good, at least insofar as, number one, he will tell you, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but he can also teach you certain things and concepts and whatnot, which obviously they do know because they spend a lot of time learning those things. But critical thinking is shockingly low among football fans from what I've seen in most cases. And again, the hilarious part about it is the idea that you must listen to them because they're experts. The funny thing is, they don't even agree with each other. So how does that work? Who do you agree with in that regard? They're the experts. They would know. Interesting when they seem to wildly disagree. And just like every other human being, by the way, many of them oftentimes, and we're crossing over into a new realm here, The reason human beings are almost entirely not trustworthy is because people are moral first and intellectual second. And so for whatever reason, most people will lead with things that they feel are right. Whether that's just generally being nice, they just want to say the nice thing, or because it's a certain group of people that we want to prop up. We'll leave that alone, but you know what I'm talking about. They're entirely untrustworthy, which is why I like stats. Even if you say film, and I've said this before, I'm repeating myself a lot, but some of you maybe are new or you missed the episode or whatever. Film study is a perfect way to understand how good or bad somebody is. However, there's a massive group of caveats here. It assumes first and foremost that you watch that player every snap of every play. It also assumes perfect knowledge. It also assumes perfect information. Nobody's watching every snap. Nobody has perfect information. Information being knowing what the play calls were, knowing all the nuance of all those things. Perfect knowledge being football perfectly. If you had all of those things, you could grade players, and it would be much better than any metric you could ever have, because context is key. But the fact of the matter is statistics can take into account context actually very well, not perfectly, but quite well, especially over a long period of time, and generally much better than any one individual is actually putting in the work or even able to put in the work to watch the film. Most people don't even have access to it. They're not even paying for the All-22 over at NFL.com anyways. So they're relying on zero knowledge of play calls or whatever, right? We're going to fire LaFleur because of bad play calls. What was the play call? You have no idea. You have no idea what the play call was. Perfect knowledge. How perfectly do you know football? You don't know football, dude. Even among like Packers content creators, take your favorite guy that is the most knowledgeable, even a former player, compared to perfect knowledge. They don't have it. They're better at it than all of us. But again, when people talk about film as the best way to do things, that implies a lot of assumptions. Because I would happily take even mediocre metrics over some jagoff who doesn't know what he's doing, watching the TV copy back, arbitrarily just saying, I like that, I don't like that. So yeah, I'm a stats guy for that reason. It's going to give me a significantly better picture than almost anybody else has, especially if they have this like anti-stats thing, because they have it in their mind that makes them somehow smarter. They're smart enough to know that stats are not really the answer. And so I'm going to run to YouTube and find somebody who's going to break down the tape. Okay, well, find the guy that's going to break down how good of a job Banks did at left guard. And if you can't, you better not have any opinions on that. Zero. But let's spend a second on PFF. I've done this several times. I'll do it several more. Spend a lot of time talking about metrics because I'm trying to maybe refine my quarterback one a little bit so that I can, as we go forward, get as good of an idea as I can of how good of a job Jordan's doing. And I'd like to do it for other positions, but the fact of the matter is quarterbacks have a billion metrics. Everybody else has just a couple. Especially when you get to like offensive line. They basically have none. PFF grade is probably the most reliable metric you're going to find for an offensive lineman. I mean, it's going to be very hard to find anything for them. But we went through and did a lot of work on what makes a metric a good metric and all the different things that you can do to test and verify and all that kind of stuff. And at the end, it's like, all right, let's do that for PFF. And obviously this has been done. First of all, by PFF, of course. Who would be more interested than PFF to make sure, and as they continue to refine their metric, what you want is to make sure that your grades are reflective of what you want them to be reflective of. And so when you talk about going back to what we had mentioned before, whether they are stable, whether they are predictive of the future or all that kind of stuff, one way that gets talked about in terms of statistical circles or whatever is signal compared to noise, which is like the most important thing with statistics because everything overlaps with everything else. When you take a lot of these quarterback grades, the noise would be all the other variables. How much the offensive line or the wide receiver or all these other people contributed to that play. when you take the full value of that play and give it to the quarterback, everybody else's contribution would be the noise. The signal, the thing we're trying to get to, is the quarterback. And so all these studies have been done, yes, by PFF especially, but also to verify and validate their own product. But also outside people have done this, and they have proven time and time and time again that PFF has done a very good job at carrying predictive signal and not just noise. And so what they generally have found is that when you combine the PFF passing grades, for example, with some of the efficiency stats, it will improve your quarterback projections, which again is what we're trying to do to prove how good a quarterback will be. So in other words, if you take EPA per play or CPOE and you use that to try to say, how good is this quarterback going to be? If you apply garbage, right, garbage in, garbage out, if you apply garbage to CPOE to predict how, let's say, accurate a quarterback is going to be, it's going to be worse than just using CPOE. What they found is if you apply PFF to it, it makes it better. It improves the product. It improves the predictability. Other independent people who've looked into this found PFF passing grade, for example, was the best predictor of next year EPA per play among common quarterback metrics, better than passer rating and even better than some EPA and CPOE composites. In other words, what we do when we do PFF Day, which is to take the stats and the grades to try to put together a picture, is probably the best way to do it. But the larger point here is when people online say, when you, for example, when they're, oh, Caleb had a good day, and you provide, okay, well, here's his PFF grades, and they say, ha, you actually believe that garbage? Everybody knows it's terrible. They are objectively wrong. When J.J. Watt, a former football player, says that we all laugh at PFF grades, he is objectively wrong. Now, that doesn't mean that their internal grades aren't better. They probably are. But PFF grades are objectively good metrics. In addition to just being the best that we happen to have, they're objectively good metrics, not just the stats, the grades. In fact, you could argue the grades are more valuable than the stats. Because again, if you wanted to actually use predictive type stuff, if you look at their, how many pass breakups you had, it's not really a PFF stat, I guess. I'm trying to think of a kind of general stat, but not a CPOE, like a good stat. I don't know if it's better or not, but it's entirely conceivable that, for example, a PFF receiving grade might be better than yards per route run. That may not be the case, but it potentially. So even the notion of well, their stats are good, but the grades everybody knows are garbage. Everybody's wrong. Objectively, mathematically proven to be absolutely wrong. This is not opinion. And if you think it's opinion, you are mathematically illiterate because you can prove these things. Now, that doesn't mean that the PFF grade is all-encompassing and tells you everything that you need to know. In fact, PFF grades work exactly like stats do. And what I've always said about stats, because a grade kind of in a sense is a stat. It's just a very comprehensive stat. It's a compilation of a bunch of grades. When they or a bunch of stats, when they give you a PFF passing grade, for example, they're essentially using a bunch of stats. How many accurate, highly accurate, inaccurate, uncatchable passes were there? They essentially set up a very comprehensive statistical grading system. And then they go through and check off all the stats, and then it puts together a grade for you. But what I've always said about stats in general is the first thing you have to do is understand what it's trying to tell you, because we have this bad habit of looking at a stat and saying that all of them basically are trying to tell you how good a quarterback is comprehensively. No, it's not. EPA per play doesn't purport to tell you. It isn't making a claim that this is a stat that tells you comprehensively how good in totality somebody is. You have to find out what it's telling you that it's telling you. Each one is setting out to be as accurate as it can in a specific realm. Here's what PFF's claim is. Grades measure how well a player executed his assigned responsibility on each play independent of results or teammates. What that means is there is gray area around that. You can make arguments about how that isn't going to be able to fully give you a picture of how good somebody is. What about in this situation or this situation? That's fine, because they didn't make the claim that this will tell you how good somebody is. Had somebody argue with me, don't talk to me about PFF when they put Geno ahead of Pat Mahomes this past week. Geno threw for like 60 yards, Mahomes for like 303 touchdowns. And my response was, so? Well, you can't tell me that. I mean, okay, well, if you're concerned with stats, then why do you need PFF anyways? PFF isn't trying to tell you the stats. They're giving you something other than the stats. And so it's a refusal to even acknowledge what PFF is trying to tell you so that you can dunk on PFF. You're not dunking on PFF by saying you're not telling me what you're claiming, that you're not even claiming to tell me. It's like using a scale to determine who's the strongest. Well, I mean, there's some correlation. I mean, if you have a lot of muscle, you're going to weigh more. If you have a lot of fat, you're going to weigh more too. What is your point? Like, why would you use a scale to determine who's the strongest? And by the way, if you read the instructions of the scale, you go anywhere online, you're not going to find anywhere on the website of this company proposing or claiming to have anything to do with strength. Some of them might have the ability to try to tell you about muscle composition or fat composition or all these different things, but generally it's not a strength metric. There are other things that you would look for that specifically. And so theoretically, you could have Geno throw very few plays, which is, obviously you have one guy come out for one play and get a 70 grade. Are you saying that he was better than this guy? No, he only played one play. How could he be better? He didn't provide hardly any value. He played one play, but that's not what PFF is claiming to tell you. It's telling you how he performed on that one play. That's basically it. Now, there's going to be some general parallels between a guy playing 70 snaps and having an 80 grade, between how well he executed his assigned responsibility on each play, independent of results or teammates. If you have an 80 grade over 70 snaps, yeah, you're not going to find a lot of wiggle room between that and PFF telling you they had a good day. But you can certainly have a debate for Pat Mahomes to say PFF is right in their assessment of the grades, and also, trying to pick my words carefully here, but you could argue he had a quote-unquote good day if you wanted to. I don't really care. He did what he needed to do. Whatever, fine. But that doesn't mean PFF is wrong. What PFF is telling you is that he did not execute his assigned responsibilities at an above average rate when you remove the contributions from the offensive line, the wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs. To pretend that it's impossible for him to have played at a below average rate and end up with good looking statistics is ridiculous. And the point that the person made to me was, well, I would expect that they would line up. Yes, and they usually do. Usually guys with good stats will end up with good grades. Guys with bad stats will end up with bad grades. However, you would also expect that they're not going to line up once in a while. And the problem is everybody freaks out in those rare instances where they don't line up, even though you should expect them to not line up on occasion. Well, this is how you know. Whenever I see this is how you know PFF's no good. No, this is exactly how you know PFF is doing what they're supposed to do. If stats gave you the whole picture, then why would you need somebody to watch the film for you? Why would you need to watch the film? You could see Mahomes threw 350 yards and 3 touchdowns, and you would not need to watch the film. You knew he had a good day, including the team. The team doesn't need to go back and watch the tape. He didn't do anything wrong. He was perfect. He did a great job. Great game. No, they're going to go back and look at it, and he's going to get a grade, and it's not going to be based on the stats. It's going to be based on, wait for it, how well he executed his assigned responsibilities independent of results or teammates. Meaning an inaccurate 5-yard pass that got taken 60 yards to the house is statistically going to be represented as a 65-yard touchdown pass from Pat Mahomes. However, from PFF's standpoint and from the grading of the team standpoint, that's a negative grade because you sucked at throwing a 5-yard pass. Do you see how that works? Okay. All right, so shower thoughts have been exhausted. There we go. We got that off our chest here. All right, let's take our final break. I want to go through where the Packers stand because we have to talk about it because we're once again in a situation of enjoy it while it lasts. Because unless and until the Packers start performing at a better clip than they are, I wouldn't expect this to maintain for forever. But I guess that's up to the Packers. As long as they keep winning, nobody can overtake them. Still, we got to talk about that. So let's take a break. We'll be right back. All right, why don't we start off with the injury report. First of all, the Steelers basically have nobody injured. TJ Watt and Cam Hayward didn't participate, but it was just veteran rest. Will Howard, backup quarterback, was a full participant. Malik Harrison, their linebacker, was a full participant. Calvin Austin was a full participant. The only limited person was Zach Frazier, their center. 6 total people on the injury report, and everybody was either veteran rest or full participant except one guy, Zach Frazier. As for the Packers, let me again just read off all the names that are on the list to give you a sort of comparison. Aaron Banks, Anthony Belton, Nate Hobbs, Josh Jacobs, Xavier McKinney, Brandon McManus, Jordan Morgan, Zach Tom, Lucas Van Ness, Quay Walker, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, Evan Williams, and Devontae Wyatt. That's 14 players that are on the Packers injury report, more than double. Of that group, Brandon McManus did not participate, which is a wild situation in which, I kind of think the will we get rid of McManus and stick with this new guy conversation is kind of silly. Not silly, that's not a fair way to put it. It's a decent thing to discuss, but I think it's heavily in the favor of McManus. We just don't know what this other guy brings. Again, I tend to lean coward when it comes to these things. I'm sure some of you are a little bit more adventurous, buy low, sell high. Maybe this guy's a freak, and we'll get this hidden secret gem thing. But McManus is good, and we know McManus is good, and we were able to lock him up, and we're fortunate, and we shouldn't let that go because of some kind of a whim. But if McManus can't go again, and this guy comes in and makes all his kicks, multiple field goals and extra points, it just adds to the overall question of, is this guy freaking for real? In addition, Lucas Van Ness did not participate, and Dontavian Wicks did not participate. I am really looking forward to getting Lucas Van Ness back. I think Van Ness has been playing really well. I love having 3 pass rushers that I like. Again, I don't think Rashawn and Van Ness are on that, elite tier, but I think they are in the good to very good category, and that's huge considering Van Ness was nowhere near that category as of last year. I'd speculated that he started to look good down the stretch, which is great, and it's a decent sign, and we'll see how it goes. And then, obviously, in the offseason, he was just blowing everybody away. Seems to be somewhat continuing. His snap counts are limited because he is number 3, and so the numbers don't seem as impressive, but when you look at the per-snap numbers, he is playing really well. I haven't directly looked at it, but I would not be surprised if his numbers are better than Rashawn's numbers. In fact, if I had to bet, I would say they were. With that said, it's not all bad news, because if there's somebody I want back more than Van Ness, it's Devontae Wyatt, and he was back practicing. He has a knee injury. It was a limited participant, but he was out there. He was practicing. He was looking good. Now, I do think that there's maybe a little bit too much hype behind this Devontae Wyatt train, and I hate to say that as a guy that's been begging for Devontae Wyatt to break out and all that stuff, and he's looking really, really, really good. But I think what's happening is there's a little correlation-causation thing going on where he got hurt, and then it seemed like the defense wasn't as good, so everybody's just saying, well, Wyatt must be that piece. He's the guy. He's what made it all go. I can't believe it. I wouldn't have thought, but it turns out it's true. Our run defense is bad, our pass, whatever the thing is, Wyatt must have been that piece. I don't really think it's that simple. I think there is an element of 2 things happened at the same time but weren't necessarily related, although I'm sure Wyatt helps the defense for sure. I think there's also an element of some things just kind of got worse, or other teams figured things out, or whatever the case may be, at the same time that Wyatt got hurt. So I can't wait to get Wyatt back. I do think he improves this defense for sure. I think that pressure up the middle is going to be a big deal. I don't want people thinking once Wyatt's back, I want to see that week 1 defense back, because that's 100% of the issue that we had, and now he's back, and so everything should be perfect the way that it was. I don't think that's the way that works. Also limited on the injury report, Evan Williams limited with a back injury. Christian Watson limited knee injury. I have seen some articles on Watson floating around that breaking news, he's expected to be back. Maybe there's something more to it that I haven't seen, but the couple articles that I've seen to go track that down, it basically just says that his 21-day window closes, and so he's going to have to be added to the 53 or whatever. That doesn't mean he has to play. I really hope he does, but at this point, it seems like he's pretty much ready. Like, he could go out and play anytime. It's really just the team kind of going, I don't know, let's just hold off on that. And I don't know how much longer they're going to do that. They may do that for several more weeks. I have no idea. So expect him to be added to the 53. Whether or not he plays, no idea. Very different things. But he has been practicing for a few weeks now. I'm hoping he's ready to go. This feels like a very good opportunity to do it. It seems like it's a good game to do it. I think we're going to need that little bit of a boost, especially just a little bit of couple tidbits I've seen about how they play defense. Big plays are going to be available, and having Golden and Watson on the field, I'm just saying. But, don't rush it or anything if you really think he can't do it. Also limited Zach Tom with his now back injury, so I guess it's good that there's no more of an oblique injury, which is great, but now we've got a back injury, which has been a serious epidemic for our offensive linemen all year this year. It's very strange. Xavier McKinney, ankle and knee injury, limited participant. Josh Jacobs' calf injury was limited. Nate Hobbs with a knee injury, limited. Anthony Belton with an ankle injury, limited. Aaron Banks with a groin injury, limited. Lots and lots of limited that I'm hoping are all going to get better, because that's a lot of people that are question marks right now. Otherwise, the full participants, Jordan Morgan with a knee injury, which is a good sign. Quay Walker with his neck injury was a full participant, so that seems to be a good deal. I hate to do this, but this is how it goes sometimes. I am going to call it right here. I just feel like it's already 47 minutes in, and I don't really want to just get started on it, so we'll do it tomorrow. For sure, we'll do it tomorrow, all right? It'll give me an opportunity to dig up a few more and for some other people to drop their rankings and do all that kind of stuff. So, anywho, I'm going to leave it at that. You all have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you tonight, tomorrow, whatever. Have a good one. Bye-bye.